Hello everyone, my name is Zoe. I'm very happy to be here with you at Polyglot Conference 2021. I'm filming this from Melbourne, Australia. And so let's get started with our presentation. I will share my PowerPoint with you. Here we are. Okay, so here we are. How likely is Spanish to become the world's next lingua franca? This question is a little bit ambitious. It's an ambitious question to propose, to answer. So think of it more of an excuse to explore other topics of linguistics. So maybe as a subtitle, as another title, I included thinking about language from a linguistics point of view. That is what this presentation is really about. And well, yeah, a little bit of a disclaimer is that even though this question is not to be really answered, this presentation is more about asking more questions, better questions about language and the future of global languages and lingua francas. So in this presentation, some of the contents are going to be global languages and lingua francas. How are they similar and different, these two different terms? We're going to touch on English, Chinese, and Spanish. We are going to talk about language attitudes. We're going to talk a little bit about the growth of Spanish. So yes, let's get started. First, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Zoe Gómez Cassardo. That's my name in Spanish. I was born and raised in Argentina, and I've been here in Melbourne for the last 2 years. I work as a Spanish teacher, and I also work as a translator, translating from Spanish to English and English to Spanish. I have completed my master's in applied linguistics. I'm really thrilled and happy about this achievement. And maybe not so shockingly, I love languages. I can speak Spanish, English, and French fluently, quite some Italian. I think my Italian is somewhat decent, and I'm just getting started with Hindi. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit about me, but let's just jump into our presentation. The first thing to consider is what is a lingua franca? What is the definition of lingua franca? So lingua franca is a language that is adopted as a common language between speakers whose native languages are not mutually intelligible. That means that inside maybe a community, a city, a country, one language is established as the common language, the language that everybody speaks in order to understand one another, even though their native languages or dialects sometimes are different. Some general considerations about this is that global languages and lingua francas are sometimes used as synonymous, like in a synonymous way. So sometimes by global language, the author of certain, let's say, presentation paper or work means they mean the same, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes global languages mean just major languages, languages that are geographically widely spread and popular. There is no really an academic consensus yet about what are really global languages, but as we all know, there are some languages that are very, very popular, such as English, Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, French, etc. Other thing to consider is that official language and lingua franca are not really the same. Here in Australia, if I were to ask you what is the lingua franca, well, it's English, right? The whole country communicates in English, but is it the same as the official language, or is it not? In the case of Australia, for example, there is non-official language. By official language, I mean a language that is declared in their either constitution or any other legal documents as the official language. That is known as the jure. The jure language means that the country actually constituted as an official language. Instead, a de facto language is what is happening with English in Australia. It's just the global language that everybody uses. Another thing to consider about linguas francas, this will be the real plural in Latin, right? Lingua franca comes from Latin. Linguae francae would be in Latin, but I'm thinking no one uses linguae francae, so let's stick with lingua francas. Hindi and English are this is an example of lingua franca, right? In India, there are more than 400 languages, more or less, in different degrees of survival of the language. But Hindi and English are the languages which everyone, the North and the South, communicate with one another. Mandarin Chinese is the lingua franca in China. And for example, French was the lingua franca of the world, most of the world, for diplomacy and for cultural affairs. Nobody would have thought that someday French would not be the language to use for diplomacy and culture. That was a little bit crazy to think. And Latin and Greek, as you may know, they were the linguas francas of the Latin of the Roman Empire. Let's talk a little bit about Latin. So once upon a time, Latin was the lingua franca of the empire, and a quarter of the world was speaking Latin. That's approximately the same as the amount of people speaking English today. So yeah, it could be considered that Latin was the lingua franca of the world in the past, right? So Latin started at 750 BC, at let's say around that period, with the establishment of Rome, and it started dying out around 470 something AD. That is when the Roman Empire fell. So Latin, it didn't as much die as it changed. Latin changed into Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian, mainly. And one of the reasons that Latin changed is said to be because it was really, really complex. So yeah, it changed in these different, slightly easier forms of language. Okay, so today the world is globalized with the invention of the internet. English is a language that is connected to the world like never before. So we can say that the world's first lingua franca as such is English. English is the preferred language in many, many areas. For example, just to name a few: international business, education, academia, science, technology, diplomacy, entertainment, radio, seafaring, tourism, and aviation. So English really touches on many aspects of today's life. And English is so far always on the rise. There are no signs of English stopping being the lingua franca of the world. So this question, what is the language of the future, is we humans love to think about things, even though we have no reason to think that English is stopping at any point soon. I don't know if you heard, but rumor has it that Chinese is going to be the language of the future. Many people think that this is going to be this way. They have different They have different answers to why is it going to be Chinese. Back in the day when I was about to study translation, people were telling me, don't study Spanish, don't study English, study Chinese. Chinese is the language of the future. So there is a lot of insistence that Chinese is the language of the future. However, it kept me thinking, why? Why is it so? And for this, I guess it's good to ask ourselves the following question. What does the future look like? What is the future? What do we think when we think about future? And if you think about technology, neon lights, tall buildings, cars, flying cars maybe, you're not alone. I guess that most people think about these things when we think about future. At least I do, and many people that I've asked this question before, the first answer is are these, right? Technology, cars, buildings, lights. So that made me think that probably we are linking future to technology, economy, and power. And only that, probably also politics, environment, global warming, etc. But what about other aspects of life? Do we ever think about other aspects in the future? Like, for example, what is the future of the arts, cinema, photography, writing? What is the future of tourism? What is the future of flora and fauna? What is the future of mental health? What is the future of leisure activities? These are things that don't make the front page of the newspapers because they are not what we are obsessed about. We are obsessed about technology, economy, power. So in the same way that we link the future, the idea of future with the idea of technology, with the idea of economy and politics and power and all of these things that we are so obsessed about, I thought that maybe something similar happened. For example, let's consider the word chino in Spanish, that's Chinese. Do we link the idea of China, Chinese language to something? And the answer is yes. In Spanish, we have this saying, es chino básico, that is basic Chinese, or es un chino, is Chinese, or is a Chinese, I would say. These two expressions mean is very difficult. So doing that is very difficult. It's basic Chinese, or is Chinese. And we have un cuento chino, that is a Chinese tale, this is a lie, but it's not just a lie, it's a very complex lie. It has many little parts, so it's a very sophisticated and complex lie. So the idea of chino in Spanish leads us to difficult or complex. And I would say also we think of Chinese as difficult, complex, exotic, far away. That is very different from what I encounter here in Australia. Australia not only is much closer to Asian countries, China and other Asian countries. In Australia, particularly in Melbourne, there is a lot of immigration. So Chinese is much more of a common language. More people are studying Chinese. There are more communities of Chinese people here. So Chinese is not as foreign as it is for example, Argentina. I can just talk of my experience, right? In Argentina, we think of Chinese as something very difficult, very distant from our reality. So difficult and complex. You know what other thing is difficult and complex? The future. The future is difficult and complex. So this is what are called in linguistics language attitudes. That is pretty self-explanatory. It's an attitude that speakers have towards language. Everyone has an attitude toward language. There are, well, it can be towards a language or towards a dialect. This is what gives a language or dialect prestige, or it can take away the prestige of studying that language. Let's take a little bit of a look to Chinese. When we say Chinese, we most of the time mean Mandarin Chinese, or at least that's what I mean when I say Chinese in this presentation. As you know, there are many other languages in China, but let's take a look at Mandarin Chinese. This language doesn't use an alphabet, but it uses a logogram writing system. That means that it uses characters as a way to express a whole word, a whole idea. There are many characters in Chinese language. That is maybe what it makes it so challenging to learn. There are between 20 to 50,000 characters, but an educated Chinese person will know about 8,000 characters, and you only need 2 to 3,000 to read a newspaper. So I guess that makes it a little more attainable, not as challenging as one may think. I would gladly take on Chinese. I love a challenge. I know it's a whole new writing system that I have to learn, and there are so many other challenges as the tones, but I would gladly do it because I love languages. So maybe for me it's easier, even pleasurable to study Chinese. That's because I'm a linguophile. Is everyone just gladly going to study Chinese, even though if it means changing from a Latin alphabet to a logogram writing system, learning all these characters, learn a complete different language than the one that is now popular? Maybe the difficulty of learning Chinese, new characters, a new writing system will represent, will make this language maybe not likely to be the next language of the world, the next lingua franca. There is something called the principle of the least effort, and this is something that touches many fields, from evolutionary biology to web page design. So you can read in the definition here. So it postulates that animals, people, and even well-designed machines will naturally choose the path of the least resistance or effort. It was widely studied by the linguist George Siff, and it also is relevant to language. So he studied the principle of the least effort in connection to languages a lot. I will leave a video that is very good. I think you cannot see it because I'm right there, but I will leave it after the on the last slide. I will leave some references so you can check all these videos and all this material. The principle of the least effort says that we tend to choose the path of the least resistance. This applies to languages. So languages naturally tend to be simplified. That is one of the reasons, right? If you remember what we were saying before, that is one of the reasons that Latin changed and favored these other languages, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and so on. Okay, so I don't know if you came across this meme before. 4,000 years and we're back to same language. However, hieroglyphs and emoji are not the same. I'm leaving this video with the references if you find this interesting, so you can see how they work. I included only for the emoji part. Right now, we tend to simplify language using emojis, and let's see. Well, first of all, as you remember, Latin change or die because of it was overly complex. So now Spanish, Italian, French, etc. are used. We tend to use abbreviation, initialism, acronyms, all in order to simplify language, to make it more clear, more clear. Versions like this, for example, see you later. And also that's why we love slang or short language. Okay, so even though the Chinese characters may be challenging or difficult, complex to learn, there is something called pinyin that is a system of writing Mandarin Chinese by using Latin alphabet letters. So there are many articles out there saying that the complexity of Chinese is not going to be an impediment to make Chinese the next word lingua franca, because even though if we are not going to learn all of this, every one of us, there is this system with pinyin that allows us to write on our phones or computers using Latin letters, and then translating into the characters, and also reading from characters and translating into pinyin, and even translating into other languages. So characters may not be a problem. And even if we had to learn the Chinese characters, just maybe they are not as scary and challenging as we thought they are. Maybe they're pretty learnable. So most importantly, language attitudes are a major difference between Eastern and Western cultures. So Eastern culture thinks of language as language and communication are not a form of representing the world, but essentially a mode of activity for the sake of establishing and maintaining a harmonious relationship with social others. This is very, very, very different from Western culture thought of language, which is exactly the opposite. Language is rather representationalist and individualistic. In Western culture, language is considered as something else. It's not there just for the sake of communicating with others. It's a thing of its own. Our whole identity is in language in Western cultures. So maybe, just maybe, this is the one factor that will drive language in the future. Okay, so I would like to share in the words of David Crystal. He's David Crystal, and he's a linguist studying global languages and English language. So I would like to share this short clip.
To think of scenarios where, for whatever reason, American power diminishes, the power of some other nations grows, and you get other parts of the world becoming more dominant. And, you know, people say, well, what about Chinese? Well, one day maybe. At the moment, there's no sign of China wanting Chinese to be a global language because they're all learning English in China for the most part. But you could imagine a scenario where it was the other way around. You can imagine a scenario when Spanish is the fastest growing language in the world at the moment, population-wise, because of South America and Central America, and increasingly in North America, Spanish is becoming very widely used. You can imagine a scenario where one day we might all end up speaking Spanish.
Okay, so thank you, David Crystal.
To think of.
And there we go. Okay, so yeah, as he said, Spanish is the fastest growing language in the world. 21 countries have Spanish currently as the official language, and in 31 countries is widely spoken. These are just some of the numbers illustrating this growth. So Spanish is the second language with the most with more native speakers. That is second right after Chinese. 21st Spanish-speaking countries, and it represents 7% of the world GDP. There are 489 million native speakers and a total of 585 million. 22 million students study Spanish in the world in 110 countries. It's the third most used language of the internet and the second most used language for academic publication, scientific publication. One of the most important reasons of this growth is due to the increasingly rising population of Hispanic people in North America. This is 18.7% in 2020. So one thing that Spanish have and some other Western cultural languages have are institutions, entities, committees, all there trying to preserve the language and spread the language. So it's like we care a whole deal about Spanish. We have the Royal Spanish Academy, that is RAE, Instituto Cervantes, and the Association of Academies of the Spanish Language, that is ASALE. And all of these institutions are working all the time to put together committees and congress. That this one was the last one on 2019 in Argentina. Or, for example, every year they have this informe. I lost the word for informe. This report. There you go. This report for showing stats and numbers about the growth of the language, the uses of the language, etc. So this is the key factor. Maybe Western culture languages care a whole deal more about the language than Eastern cultures. Maybe, just maybe, China is going to be the leading economy of the world, but they will be happy to continue speaking English because it's just more convenient and they don't care that much. Other factors that help and contribute to this spread of the Spanish language and culture in the world are sport figures such as Messi, Maradona, and many others, some religious figures, and of course, Latin music. Latin music is on its peak. It's never been so popular before in the world. And so in conclusion, because we covered a lot of ground, but I would like you to leave with these points in mind. English is not showing signs of ceasing to be the world's lingua franca right now. But what if this happened? What is the next language likely to take its place? I would say that it doesn't matter which language it is. The next lingua franca is likely to be a convenient one for what we saw of the principle of the least effort. It has to be convenient rather than just the language of the most powerful nation. Even the most powerful nation may choose to use another language. Language attitudes matter and they influence greatly the dynamics of language, so you should always pause and think from whose point of view something is being said, right? What is the cultural background of this someone? Eastern and Western cultures, language attitudes are vastly different. And the last point is that because of the immense growth of Spanish language in the world today, it will not be unreasonable to think that Spanish would be probably, maybe, the next lingua franca. Thank you very much. This is the end of the presentation. And as I told you before, I'm going to share the references with you. So maybe you can pause and take a look. These are only some of the most interesting ones. Okay, so thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed it. You hopefully learned something from today. I'll be happy to talk more about this. So please reach out. You can find me at happygolanguage.com or my social media, as you can see here. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.